You've talked a lot about a Green New Deal. The Green New Deal has kind of become front and center in our political conversations. A lot of that is thanks to the Green Party. But how does your Green New Deal differ from Bernie Sanders' Green New Deal or the Green New Deal that you hear about from the Democrats?
Well, first of all, Bernie Sanders' Green New Deal is an order of magnitude better and more committed than any of the other Democrats. I mean, I did an article about this in the fall, and I looked at these programs. None of the other Democrats were serious at all. They were not making real public investments. To the extent they were, it was tax subsidies and tax breaks. Bernie's was $16.3 trillion over 10 years, with a goal of getting to zero carbon emissions by 2050. Zero carbon emissions in the transportation and power sectors by 2030, but the rest by 2050. And the Green New Deal that I've been talking about, I was the first candidate to campaign for a Green New Deal in this country in 2010, running for governor of New York. And what I put out for this campaign is what we call the eco-socialist Green New Deal. It's actually $27.5 trillion over 10 years. And when we looked at Bernie's numbers, we think his numbers are good for what he's trying to do. He's just on a longer timeline. The other difference between what he is proposing and what I am proposing is that he just wants to take over the power sector, power production, electric power production. We want to take over the whole energy sector. We want to take over the Exxons and the Koch industries, who are not going to reinvest their fossil fuel profits in renewables. We're going to use some fossil fuels in the transition. We should use those earnings to invest in renewables. So we should nationalize on a democratic basis the fuel industry, the oil and gas industry, as well as power production. We also need to have a public transportation corporation dealing with railroads and airlines. Airlines are cheap right now. We should buy them up now, but Trump's not going to do that. But we need to coordinate our rail system with our air transportation system so that we can replace a lot of the air traffic for short and intermediate routes with high-speed bullet trains. We need to convert the rail, freight rail system to electricity, electric power, and densify it so that we're not so dependent on trucks on roads. And then we need to rebuild the trolley systems, the light rail systems that every city in this country had between the 1890s and the 1930s. I mean, everywhere I've campaigned until this coronavirus shut down, there was traffic jams, and that's inexcusable. So we need to take over the transportation sector. And then finally, manufacturing. If we're going to build this rail system, if we're going to build solar and wind generation, heat pumps so we can heat and cool our buildings without gas and oil, we need to rebuild our manufacturing. We hardly have a machine tool industry left in this country, and that's what you need to build other manufacturing equipment for intermediate goods and consumer goods. So we got to start there. So we want to see a Green New Deal factory in every city, and they'll be on a different basis, on a clean technology, zero waste. Well, instead of making steel with coke ovens, we make them with electric arc furnaces. But we need to do this through the public sector. The steel industry is already moving that way, but they want to wear out their coke ovens before they replace them. And then cement, that's 5% of the world's carbon footprint, because you put calcium carbonate in the cement, you heat it up, the calcium hardens it, and the carbon goes into the atmosphere. There are other ways of making cement. We got to scale that up. Plastics is a big crisis, an environmental problem aside from climate change. We can make biodegradable plastics with agricultural feedstocks. And what we're planning now is all this oil and gas, oil or gas drilling primarily, in, say, Pennsylvania, and they're going to build a big petrochemical plastics complex in Appalachia, in the Ohio Valley. And that is an environmental disaster in itself. So what I'm saying is we need to do what we did during World War II, when the federal government took over or built a quarter of the manufacturing capacity of the country in order to turn industry on a dime into what they called the arsenal of democracy, which armed the US, the UK, Russia to defeat the Nazis. And we need to do nothing less to defeat climate change. So that is where I go beyond Bernie, on a faster timeline, more through the public sector. And I just want to say that the rest of the stuff we're hearing from the Democrats, they took the Green New Deal, which was the signature issue for the Green Party over the last decade, and they took the brand and watered down the content. That non-binding resolution for a Green New Deal that AOC and Markey put into Congress, it dropped the ban on fracking and new fossil fuel infrastructure. It dropped the phase out of nuclear power. it dropped the big cuts in military spending to put into the Green New Deal, and it extended the deadline to 2050. And then Pelosi won't even let them vote on it. And when McConnell said, well, we'll let you vote on it because we want all you senators running for president to go on a record, Schumer said it was a trick and told them all to vote present, which they did, except the 4 Democrats that voted with the Republicans no on the Green New Deal. So, you know, my argument is if you want to see a Green New Deal, at this point, it looks like the Green Party is your only option.
So you covered a lot of ground there, but there's a couple specifics I wanted to get into. You know, first of all, I know that you know, fracking is a big thing that we needed to stop yesterday, and you know, I have some personal attachment to this too because I'm actually from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania originally, and when I was in grad school, I did a media ecology study on kind of the fracking industry, and you know, I mean, they had 2,800 environmental regulations that just went not reported at all. Just no one talked about it, just went under the radar. We never did the proper homework about this stuff. It is grossly unsafe. It is not helping our domestic energy needs at all because it's just, I mean, it's holding on to a model that should be in the past and should have been in the past years ago. And it's we're shipping all this energy other places anyway. So all it's doing is padding CEOs' pockets. So yeah, fracking ban is absolutely necessary. But you mentioned rail. Do you have a plan for an extensive United States rail system? Because that's something that they started talking about a little while back because everyone's like, oh, well, our country, I just can't imagine that. And it's like, well, yeah, you can because we used to have it. We used to have it. Now we just do a new version of that. It's far from impossible. So do you have anything like specific to that?
Well, in the Eco-Socialist Green New Deal, which is on our website, it's a budget. And we cost out what we need to build in terms of the number of jobs it would create and the amount of carbon it would save. And we have a whole discussion there about how to build this system out and what it'll cost. So we're talking about, you know, most of our freight transportation being on rails, and then the final, you know, distribution of those goods would be electrified vehicles, you know, from hubs to stores or final consumers. And then in terms of the intercity transportation, we want to build high-speed rails like every other advanced country has. I mean, it's not a technological problem. It's a problem of politics and will. And then the trolley systems, you know, we could probably do better than we did now. You could put them with lightweight. You can put them above the existing streets so you don't disrupt the streets with, you know, rails right on the streets. And you have these little pod cars and they can be, you know, you can order your ride and it'll be like, you know, a little gondola on a ski lift and it'll just whisk you off to where you want to go on this thing that's above the roads. I mean, that's an option, but the point is to have a mass transit system that is a public good that we use collectively and minimizes the need for personal cars. In fact, if we build that kind of transportation system, if you need a personal car, you know, because you want to go out in the country or you got something to haul that you can't put in the public transportation, you know, that can be rented. And that itself could be a public utility so that, you know, your municipal or your metropolitan transportation authority has those vehicles available for rent.
So just as like a for instance here, so you know, I was a road comic for a really long time, and I still tour a good bit, but mostly I go to cities now. But back in the day, you know, a lot of your gigs early on, they're in, you know, smaller cities and smaller markets. You're trying to build a name for yourself and whatnot. So in this kind of futuristic scenario, would I be in a situation where, say I live in, you know, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I have a show in, you know, some small little town in Ohio, you know, 40 minutes outside of Cleveland or whatever. Could I feasibly take a train to, you know, the stop closest to that, and then there would be some type of public car sharing program where I could take a car to my show and then drive back and then take the train back home?
Yeah, and that would be more convenient than, you know, getting a car for a long drive or flying and trying to get whatever gear you got to take with you for your show make sure you get it. I lost some baggage a couple of times on the campaign so far. So, and it should be quicker. I mean, going through all the security at the airports, they want you to get there 2 hours early. There are delays. It's a lot easier to go to your local light rail system and take that to the station for the big trains that'll do the long hauls, the high-speed trains, and then do the same when you get to your destination.
So where do you stand? Are you for a federal jobs guarantee?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Is that
if you're willing and able to work, you should be able to do that. I mean, we have a work ethic in this society. It's part of your self-respect and pulling your weight in society. And, I worked in construction before I was a Teamster. And I think the most frustrating times in my life were when there was a, recession in the construction industry and there was no work. And you want to work, but you can't even find work. And so there should be jobs on the shelf, like the old Works Progress Administration, where local communities would plan public works and public services. And when you're unemployed, instead of going to the unemployment office, you can go to the employment office and say, I want my job. And the local community will have planned services or public works projects that you could work on. And they would be funded. The way they did it during the Works Progress Administration is 10% local funding. So that's just to give local buy-in and avoid boondoggles, and 90% federal funding. And there's no reason, there's so much work to do. I mean, from caring for, kids after school or elderly people that are isolated, that kind of care work to, rebuilding our sewers and water systems, upgrading our parks, public buildings. I mean, there's so much we need to do, not to mention all the green technology we need to go to clean energy, avoid climate crisis, and also deal with these other environmental problems.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and